Okay, lesson number 11, lessons in Kabbalah. So what we just saw was a video of this young man in college, and he's searching. He comes to his rabbi, Rabbi Garari, and Rabbi Garari tells him, I can't answer all your questions, so you need to go to my teacher, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And so he goes to him, and what does he ask him? He says, Vu is Gott, where is God? And first the Rebbe answers him, Umitum, God is all over the place. He says, yeah, but where is he? And he says, he's all over, in a tree, in what was the second thing he said?
Stone.
In a stone. And then he said, yeah, but where is he? And then he said, God is in your heart, if that's what you're asking. And this obviously had a very big impact. You see, when it comes to questioning God, when it comes to asking, and those who want to know and those who are trying to search, there's usually two observations that, let's say, turn people off. The first observation is that God is so great. God created the whole universe. God created all living beings. And so it can't be that God cares about the little me. In other words, they make God so great that God has an effect on my life. And I'm sure many of us have had this question before, and this has bothered many of us before. And this has bothered many others to the extent that some people say, that's it. Whatever is relevant in the Torah is not relevant for me because God doesn't care. That is usually one approach that people have that find it difficult to deal with religion or other things that are godly, so to speak. The other extreme is the opposite, where people say, I can only believe in God if I can understand God, if I can truly relate to God. If God actually is within my comprehension, within my understanding, within my life, then I will believe in God. But if I can't understand God, then to me God doesn't exist. Why are you shaking your head?
Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, obviously you don't have that question, but many people do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You agree many people have that question, right?
I did.
You had that question.
Understand.
And the Kabbalah, and even more so Hasidus, refutes both of these. I shouldn't say refutes, but really answers both of these. And that's what I want to talk about today. Either of these two, both are difficult. Either of these two are both challenging, because no matter how you say, no matter how you put it, you are boxing God. If you say God is too great, then you're saying that God is an existence that cannot relate to something so small. If you say God is beyond my comprehension, then you're saying that God is something that needs to be small enough that I can understand him. So Kabbalah introduces two concepts. And I'm going to skip a little bit because we're already late on time, later than I had anticipated. So the first one is called Sovev Kol Almin, surrounding of all worlds. And the second one is called Memalai Kol Almin, filling all worlds. For those of you who have from the first classes, those are the levels within every realm, within every world, We learned that there are 4 worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And then we learned that there are 10 Sfirot, 10 attributes or 10 levels within every world. And that's what you see, that little circle, atom-like thingy, right? So those are the 10 levels. Now, that's obviously not for today's class, but just so you understand that there are 4 worlds, and then within each world there are 10 different levels. But what we need to understand today is that there is the surrounding of the worlds, and that there is the Memalai Kolam, and the filling of all worlds. What does this mean? What this means to say is that there are 2 ways that we could relate to something. We could relate to something in a more general way, or we could relate to something in a more specific way. We learned about that everything that happens with God, everything happens within us as well. That God created man in His image, means that we also have these elements, these attributes that God made, and that's how we're able to understand it. Now, we all know what it means, Memalai Kol Almin, filling all worlds. What does this mean? This means, as we saw earlier, when you say, where is God? God gives life to every single individual according to their needs. In a tree, there's God. In a stone, there's God. In a human, there's God. Everyone has their levels of God that gives their ability to grow, and that gives them the energy that they need to exist on earth. An angel needs their level of energy. A human needs his level, his amount. And everything is according to every individual needs. Take a look at the human. We're made up of a body and a soul. The soul gives life and energy to each and every one of us. But each and every individual part of our body needs to connect to a certain energy in a certain way. So, say for example, our eyes. Our eyes are able to see. And that's because the eye is given an energy of seeing. But that energy of seeing is only something that the eye is able to feel, is able to contain, is able to use. If you give the energy of seeing to the ear would not be able to see. The ear is a vessel that can hear. So it can only use that vessel to hear. The same thing with the hands, the same thing with the feet, the same thing with the mind, the same thing with the heart. Every single individual part of our body needs a certain energy in order to survive and in order to live up to the potential that has been given to it. The same thing when it comes to everything on earth. Everything on earth needs a specific type of energy and a specific amount of godly energy in order to exist. A stone, an inanimate creature, an inanimate being, will live on very little amount of godly energy, because all that it needs is to exist. Something that is vegetative, it needs the energy to grow, but not much more than that. Something that's an animal, it needs an energy in order to walk around, to move around, to make noise, to make sounds, to see, to hear. And then of course you have the human, which needs the energy to do all the above plus. Plus what?
Speaking.
Plus speaking and understanding. Thinking. And so this is called Memalai Kol Almin, the energy that fills the world. So it doesn't mean fills the world. It doesn't mean that it fills the worlds, but it means the level, the energy that gives life to each and every individual level. And this goes in each and every world. We mentioned that there's 4 different worlds, there's 4 different realms. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. We're not going to go into detail of what each of those worlds represent. But each of those worlds, each of those realms, have its godly energy needed for its particular world, for its particular level. Then comes the next level, Sovev Kalaman, surrounding all worlds. What does it mean surround? It doesn't mean like Saturn has circles going around. But what does it mean? It means that there is an encompassing energy, an encompassing godly energy that is more general overall. The best example for this is Ratzon and Tainug. If you see those two words that I wrote. Ratzon means will, Tainug means enjoyment. Think about your life. Think about our lives. There are certain things that we understand in detail, that we do in detail. Our hands can only do one thing, our feet can only do one thing, our mind can only understand. Our mind is limited to understanding, our feet are limited to walking. However, then there are certain things that are all-encompassing. Your will encompasses everything. If you have a desire to do something, you see, if you have to explain yourself what you want, then it has to go through a process. You decide that you want to eat. Okay, but now you need to go through a process of deciding, what should I eat for breakfast? What should I eat for lunch? What am I hungry for? What am I desired for? You have certain times that you have something that is a will, that you want something, and you cannot explain what that is. You cannot even really understand why you want it. But you just really, really want it. Will, desire, is something beyond any specific level within our body. It's something that is all-encompassing everything within our life. Take, for example, something really, really crazy that you want to do. What's something really crazy?
Skydive.
You want to skydive, okay?
Thank you.
You really want to skydive.
When I was young, I thought about it.
And most people that really want to skydive, you can go and explain to them in 100 different ways how it's something that they should not do. It's not safe, it's not good, it's not healthy. But they decide, I want to do it. When they're taking that leap, their feet and their head and their mind and their heart are all putting in that desire and, at a higher level, enjoyment at that very same moment. You don't say that the mind is explaining to the foot why it wants to take a jump now. This is something that's a desire that encompasses everything. Now, desire is a little bit closer way to explain this. You have something that's even deeper, which is a tainug, enjoyment. What is something that a person really wants? A person wants a home. A person wants a place to live. Now, what exactly your home looks like, what exactly you want in your home, how you want it decorated, what you want it to look like, a lot of these are all encompassing individual levels within your psyche, within your personality, within your way of understanding. But the fact that an individual wants a home is something that is the true essence of every single human being. And someone that's homeless, you feel very bad for someone that's homeless. Someone that's homeless is almost like they don't have a life. The Talmud says someone that doesn't have a home doesn't have a life. And that's why we feel so bad for such people. Because every individual needs a home. Now, what exactly type of home you want? Okay. So that's something that you could already discuss. Those are already things within your psyche of how exactly you're going to build that home. But the very fact of a home is something that's all-encompassing to the individual. Now, when you build your dream home, what's a dream home? What is your dream home? What do you want in your dream home? No one has a dream home? You're all living in your dream homes.
Big kitchen.
A big kitchen. Does your home have a big kitchen? You never knew that you wanted a big kitchen. Now you know. This is a secret. So when you build your dream home, and you finally live in it and enjoy it, your mind and your foot are enjoying that home the same way. It's not that one is enjoying it more than the other. There may be different usage for each of the elements of your self, but the actual home itself and the way you're enjoying your home, that is all encompassing. God created this world. God created this world and allowed himself to come down to create human beings according to his desire and according to his will. Within creation, there are two levels. There's a level of surrounding and there's a level of filling. The level of surrounding means the overall encompassing energy and life that God gives to all worlds the same. Meaning the overall encompassing energy that's a godly energy allowing the worlds to exist. And then each and every individual receives their godly energy according to their needs and according to their level and according to their creation. But it's not that these are two separate entities of God. It's just that it plays out in different ways according to the vessels, according to those who are receiving it. We mentioned orot, lights, and kalim, vessels. There are those vessels that need to receive it in one way, and those vessels that receive it in another way. Just like the energy within your body. So it's not that there is a different type of energy for each and every individual, but there are different vessels allowing you to receive it in different ways. The vessel of the hand is a vessel of action. The vessel of the eye is a vessel to see. And each and every individual is created in a way that we are able to receive the godly light according to our level. Let's read this text inside for a moment. The first and highest sphere is called Keter, or crown. Within this sphere there are two main aspects. The inner aspect of Keter called Atik or Atik Yomin, and the outer aspect called Arich Ampin. Don't worry about the terms. Due to its loftiest, Atik Yomin is sometimes referred to as, I'm going to skip that term, the most concealed of all, and Atik Yomin, nothingness. The infinite light, Ein Sof, illuminates Atik without any separation. Atik is the source of Torah, which referred to as God's delight, and is revealed primarily in the esoteric teachings of the Torah, i.e. the Kabbalah. Arich Ampin is especially the expression of God's will. In other words, the outer aspect of Keter, is particularly world, is the expression of God's will and purpose in creating the world. So you have God's inner desire, inner goal, inner purpose, what we would call tainug, is his enjoyment. And you also have his outer will, which is to create the world. But regardless, each of these levels are all the external makif, the surrounding, the encompassing level called Sovev kol almin. And then each and every individual receives their level in Memalai kol almin. So when I ask you, is God relevant, and does God care about every individual? The answer is yes. Is God great enough to create such vast creatures and such vast beings? Yes. Could God create such vast creatures and such vast beings and care about every individual? Yes. It doesn't mean that one is contradictory to the other. There are two ways, two levels, two realms with both, and both are true. And it doesn't need to be that they're both true at different times or in different aspects. They're both true within their own, they're both true together at the same time. At the same time that God is the living life force of all of creation, God is also the life force of each and every individual. And if we look at each one separately, then we are already boxing God in a specific way. And this is the problem that many people make. Well, the problem that many people see, philosophers, for example, is that they come to say that if I cannot explain God in my terms, then it means that he's non-existent beyond any terms that I can explain. And you have some who do the opposite, and they say God is something that we cannot explain at all. Both of those are not true. Both of those are true. Both of those are not true. We cannot box God in a certain way. God is not limited to this world and to the individual necessities of this world, and God is also not limited to being beyond this world. We cannot really truly define God in a specific way. As much as our human minds can understand is limiting, and to say that it's completely beyond anything we can understand is also limiting. If you say God is so great that he cannot affect something small, then that's also limiting. So the truth is that there is really no definition. So Kabbalah comes along and says that we should not just sit back and say, okay, I don't understand anything, so I won't try and understand anything. This for many years was the Jewish way. A lot of Jews believe, since we can't understand, therefore we won't even try to understand. Kabbalah comes along and says, no, you could understand. You can understand as much as you can understand, and then there's a level of understanding where your only level of understanding is knowing what you don't understand. How's that sound? All right, I'll say that again. There's a level of understanding that you could understand, and then there's a level of understanding of knowing what you can understand. I'll give you a very simple term to explain this. You ever heard of the term an educated guess? Right? An educated guess is an oxymoron. If it's educated, it's not a guess. If it's a guess, it's not educated. Either you're educated and you know, or you're guessing and you don't know. But there is a concept of an educated guess. The educated guess tells us that you can learn and learn and learn and learn, and it comes to a point that you know how much you don't know, but based on what you do know, you can guess what you don't know might be. Am I losing you? You said yes, I am losing you? Or yes, you understand it?
So there's a known unknown.
There's a known unknown. And when we study Kabbalah, that is what we are doing. We are essentially studying what we know to be unknown. To sit back and say, all right, I know nothing. That's it. I'm not even going to try and understand. So this is as big of a problem as saying I understand everything.
It's a journey though. Doesn't happen
Of course it's a
once,
journey. It's a journey. It happens over 20 years, 30 years, a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
What do we learn? Abraham, our forefather, says that Abraham learned about God. And when did he first really truly understand God? At 40 years old. So you say, what do you mean? Abraham, it took him 40 years to figure it out? And it also says that at 3 years he started studying about God. So he was a little kid, he couldn't figure out between 30 and 40, he couldn't get the answer. The answer is that someone that's really searching is constantly learning and learning and learning. It wasn't until 70 years old, 75 years old actually, that God actually appeared to Abraham and said, yeah, I'm the one you've been searching for. 75 years old. And he was one person in his entire generation who believed it. Okay, there were maybe a few more, but he didn't know them. He was a single individual, an entire generation. Abraham was searching. He picked up a stone and he said, could this be a God? No, it can't be a God. He explained to himself why it can't be. He looked at the heaven. He said, could the sun be a God? He explained to himself why it can't be. So this is what, in order to study, we need to learn. And then eventually, this is what brings to our emotional feelings, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Yes?
I mean, in my personal life, I don't have questions either way, frankly. And I find it difficult to understand why someone would. And I agree with that the more you learn, the more you can still know and all that. But I also find that the people who don't want to even sit on the exploration, they've come to a hard decision for atheists that, if there's a God, how can he do such, allow such evil in the world, Hitler and stuff
Right.
like that. So,
And there are many contradictory things, if you will, within God. You could find God being the most benevolent, the most kind God. And that very same God, how could he allow things like that? And it doesn't necessarily, and again, by saying, if God does this, then I can't believe in God, then you just boxed God. You just said, I know what God needs to be, and the God doesn't fit what I decided needs to be. You see, that very word, needs, what God needs to be, is already not allowing ourselves to learn. It's already not allowing ourselves to saying that if God needs to be in the way that I have perceived him to be. If it doesn't work, then it's outside of me.
That's chutzpah.
Okay, well, many people believe that. You want to ask something?
No, I'm just thinking.
So now, so this is what Chassidus comes along and says, now let's take what we learned and try and apply it. Try and change ourselves to become better people. This is from the third chapter of the book of Tanya. It says like this: for when intellect and the rational soul deeply contemplates and immerses itself exceedingly in the greatness of God. What does it mean to think about and contemplate about God? So most people think about, well, I am going to think about God's creations. Such a vast creation, such an incredible creation. All the unique and individual elements within this world. My daughter came to me that she needs to do a project on a biome. A biome. Biome. Biome is a collection of different life sources within a specific area. So take, for example, we live in a
biosphere?
a
Biosphere?
biosphere is maybe a longer term for it. But we live in a just a little bit above a tropical weather area, and that's why within our area there would be more growth of trees, there would be more life. Certain animals could live here, certain animals can't live here. We could have alligators living here, and we can't have polar bears living here. On the other hand, if you go to Antarctica, there could be polar bears, there could be ice, there could be what? Penguins and all different types of creatures that are specific to that type of atmosphere. I'll be honest, I asked her what a biome is too, and it should be something that we know. And here my daughter taught me something that I didn't know. But this is the way the world is created. Not only the incredible individual detail to each and every creation, but where a creature lives and how the creatures that live in that place feed on those individual elements that are there. How you can have the nutrients that work for those individual elements, and so on and so forth. How certain animals live in certain places and they can't live in other places. And there's so much more that you find, and anybody that's a true rational thinker, especially the greater the scientist is, you need to know that there is some sort of creator here. And to say that all this just fall into place by accident it's a silly thing to say. You need to say there is some sort of creator with our entire universe and everything that happens and the details. And you would think that the scientists that study it, the more they study, the more they believe that there's a creator. Not always does it work that way. But anyway, this is the first basic level. This is called Memalai Kol Almin, seeing the world that it is, i.e. how God animates all creation with an inanimate divine light and life force, just as the soul fills and gives life to every part of the body. A life force which clothes itself in and unifies itself with each creature and which adapts itself to the individual needs of that creature. That is the first one that is called Memalai Kol Almin. So this is the term that you're going to learn today. Memalai Kol Almin, fills all the world. Memalai Kol Almin. That is the individual life force given to each and every creature being according to their level and their needs. Then that is the first level of contemplation. The first level of if you want to say, Kabbalistic, what am I looking for? The first level of thinking and contemplating on a Kabbalistic level. Then you have the higher level, which is when one further contemplates how it encompasses all worlds. Again, encompasses all worlds. He illuminates the worlds with godly light and life force that is far beyond the capacity of the worlds to receive internally. Rather, it affects them in an encompassing manner. This is the next thing. Now, when we come to this level, we cannot really understand what. At this point, we can only understand what not. Because anything that we are going to understand, that if you're going to say that this is what God is, then again, you are limiting what He is. And this is something that is beyond all realms. This is something that encompasses all realms. So are you talking about a life force to a specific world? No. Are you talking about a life force to an individual? No. Are you talking about the life force that's given to human beings? No. We only know what it's not. We cannot really know what it is. But we know that it's there, and we know that it exists, but we can't really define what this means. And this is the level of contemplation which needs more of a process of elimination rather than a process of explanation. Because we can't ever really understand what God is on this level. But we know that there is a level beyond the individual specific needs of every person. Now, when you think about meditation, so there are some levels of meditation, there are some rituals of meditation, which meditation is to try and relieve your soul, relieve your mind of anything. Try and think about nothing. A Jewish meditation is just the opposite. A Jewish meditation is think about more, think about more, think about more. The more you think, the more you understand, the more you're meditating and the more you're comprehending. And then comes the final level, although you can't really say a final level, but the third way to live it. So now we know of two new terms that we learned today. We learned the term called Memalai Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. So this is in addition to all the terms that we've learned until now. Memalai kol almin, he who fills all the worlds, and Sovev kol almin, he who encompasses all worlds. And both of these are realms that God has, and neither of them are limited to themselves. And then with understanding all this, is understanding that as much as we could understand about God in an encompassing manner, comes or when one contemplates another aspect of God's greatness, namely, how in His presence all creation is considered as naught. Which is that as much as we understand God relating to creation, as much as we could understand God's relationship to creation, we also understand that God is much greater than any creation. That God is beyond any creation. When you say God is the creator, that's not a way to define God. That is one of the definitions of God, but that is not the way to define God. One of the biggest questions people ask, if God created, then who created God? Right? I'm sure many of us had this question. Who created God? And the answer is that you could only have that question if you're within the realm of creation. But when there is no realm of creation, then there is no question of who created. Did I lose you on that one? If you're within the realm of creation, then you need to ask who created. But if you're beyond the realm of creation, then you can't ask who created, because creation is not within your realm. So we may have that question because we only know of existence that was created. That's the only thing we can relate to, an existence that was created. That's the only thing that we as human beings, because we are created beings. We cannot relate to an existence that's not created. Right? And so the answer is that we have no answer, essentially. But you could say that in a smart way, or you could say it in a simplistic way, in an uneducated way. You could say we don't know, so we don't know. Or you could say, well, we don't know, why don't we know? Because God is beyond creation, and creation is something that is limited to what we are able to understand. And so as much as we take the first two levels, which the first one is Memalai kol almin, which is the most basic level of meditation, the higher level Sovev kol almin, God's encompassing life to all individuals the same, both of these are all limited to God's creating the worlds and the realms. Then you have the level which is completely beyond that, which is the next highest level. And then, upon contemplating and immersing oneself, I'm now on the next page, in all the above mentioned aspects of God's greatness, the midah of awe, which is the level of awe for divine majesty, will be born and aroused in one's mind and thought. And that is, for those who have the chart, that is what would be referred to as the gevura. The gevura is the level of fear within the human being. The first three levels on the chart, not including the top one, but the first three, Bina, Chachma, Bina, and Das, are all levels of comprehension. So we went through, right, that chart. So we went through the first levels of comprehension. And then, once you go through these levels of comprehension, it now goes to the next state, which is the feelings, the emotions that are awakened from what we understand. And the first level, that is the first emotion which is awakened, is the fear. To fear and be humble before His blessed greatness, which is without end or limit, i.e. the fear will be coupled and permeated with humility, as in awe one feels in His presence a very wise or righteous person, which expresses one's bashfulness and humility before Him. And then there is also the born dread in God's heart, that explains how contemplating God's greatness arouses a fear and dread of Him, an expression of the attribute of Gevura. And next, his contemplation will give birth to the attribute of Chesed, expressed as a love of God, so that his heart will glow with the intense love of God, like fiery flames with a passion, desire, and longing, and yearning soul. Each of these expressions, fire, flames, passion, and so on, denoting a different grade of love towards the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof. So, when we contemplate, when we meditate on the greatness of God, then we could awaken these two levels of feeling, of emotions. Number one, the level of Gevura, of fear, and number two, the level of Chesed. And these bring us eventually to action, which is the next levels. And that is to actually do something about it. And with this, God gave us a special gift. God basically came and said, look, a human being will never be able to truly comprehend me, but what I am doing is I'm going to give you something that you can relate to me. And that is what?
Emotions. Emotions.
But how can you relate to God? What's God giving you? How can you truly relate to Him? So the emotions can inspire you, but can inspire you to relate to God by doing what?
Creating.
Huh? Creating. Okay. So that's the first level. And then God said, I'm going to give you one more thing. After creation, I'm going to give you my will and thought. My will and intellect. And what's another way to say that? My Torah and mitzvahs. My Torah and mitzvahs is God's desire and God's intellect. The Torah is God's mind, so to speak, and the mitzvah is God's desire. Now you say, how can it be that God is able to take His desire? We're just talking about that you can't limit God, and now we're saying that you could limit God. So what's the answer? The answer is God is limiting Himself to these 613 commandments. Why does it have to be this way? We don't know. That we can't answer. But we know that this is what God wants. God says, put a mezuzah on your door, and that is going to make the home that I really like. Maybe we should put a tree in our front door. But no, that's not what God says. It's not what He says He wants. What does He really want? He says, I'm going to tell you what I really want. I really want that you should have a mezuzah on your door. Why? We don't know. And we can give different explanations of the beautiful things that it does and the protection and so many other things that it does. But ultimately, this is God's will. So as much as we say we cannot understand God, God says, now I'm going to give you something that you will be able to understand. And that is my Torah and mitzvahs. So when you go through this process of meditation, ultimately it should awaken and arouse your emotions. One second. Your emotions of love and fear, or really works opposite, first fear, then love. But eventually it should lead to action. To say that now that I say I want to understand God and I want to connect to God, I don't really know how me as a simple human being can relate to God. And so God says, I will give you a mechanism to do that. It's the 613 mitzvahs and the Torah that I give you to study. This is the way you relate to me. So how does that work? Well, that's for a different class of how exactly that works. But what we do know is that as much as we say that we don't understand, we do have the Torah and mitzvahs to help us understand. Yes?
This is at the level of mind and desire. That is create faith and belief.
What? It's what? I didn't hear what you said.
Desire.
Mind and desire?
Yeah. You say Torah is God's mind.
Yeah. And will. And the mitzvahs is God's will.
I'm sorry about it.
It's okay.
Oh, God.
You press the side button. If you press the side button, it will turn off the ringer. One, should I give a class on cell phones? 101? Yeah.
Okay. Mine, I'm decided.
Yes.
Mine,